Welcome to the MSDW podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com. On this episode, we are talking DevOps for Dynamics 365 Business Central. While this may sound like a topic that the developers can keep to themselves, this conversation ought to help everyone get a bit more perspective on why investments in the right DevOps skills, infrastructure, and tools are so important to the future of Business Central. DevOps is more important now than it ever was in the Dynamics NAV era. Business Central has a growing customer base, and those customers have unique combinations of ISV solutions and customizations that need to keep working, even as Microsoft rolls out monthly updates to the SaaS solution and platform. It's no small challenge, and my guests, Tobia Fenster, a double Microsoft MVP and regional director, and fellow MVP Waldo, discuss what they have learned already as developers and development managers in the Business Central ecosystem. As they explain, DevOps is not simple or easy, but it is very much a manageable challenge. You just need the right tools, knowledge, and mindset. Both Tobias and Waldo's firms have their own related DevOps tools, and they tell us about the work that has gone into those. We also look a bit into the future to learn what issues and needs will be important as Business Central matures. All right. Well, hi, Waldo. Hi, Tobias. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, same here. Thanks for having me.
I thought we'd start with just some introductions. I'm guessing a lot of our listeners maybe recognize your names, have seen you present or seen your writing, but maybe we could just do some introductions first. Tobias, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. So yeah, my name's Tobias Fenster. I'm currently the CTO of the Cosmo Consult Group. I'm in the Business Central environment since about 10 years now. I started my career as a developer in the Java and open source world, and then moved over to the NAV world at that time as an infrastructure person, later moved into development. So I think I have a fairly good grasp of both worlds. And then I relatively early tried to bring things like DevOps, CI/CD, and that kind of thing into the NAV world, while it still was kind of a struggle to get that done. I was also kind of early on the Docker train, trying to bring the NAV world to Docker or vice versa, however you want to think about that. And right now I'm mostly working on, let's say, everything that's technology infrastructure around Dynamics 365. Still a big focus is Business Central, of course, but as Cosmo Consult is doing also things outside of that universe in the Dynamics 365 world, I'm also working on other things. And maybe to add, I'm a Microsoft MVP, both for business applications and for Azure, and a regional director as well.
Excellent. Well, welcome. And hey, Waldo, welcome.
Hi, I'm not as trained as Tobias in introducing myself, I'm afraid. I'm a.k.a. Wauters, or Waldo. I stumbled into the NAV world about 19 years ago. About a year later, I tried to get out of NAV world and stumbled back into it in the next employer, which I'm basically working for, still being quite active in the community by blogging and also on Mipuso and all those kind of things. I am a development manager at Effective Business Solutions. That's basically what I do mainly. This is a partner in Belgium, an ISV and a VAR. So we're building our own products and all that, and that needs to be managed. And that's kind of like my job, the technical management behind the scenes. That basically gave me an opportunity to also be involved in next, let's say, opportunity, or let's say a company that handles a product for CI/CD. Basically what we do in the company, but we will talk about that probably later on in the podcast as well.
To add on that, as you said, that you've been trying to get out, that's what I tried as well in my first week when I saw NAV, and I saw this is the editor, and you have to extend the database because it's native, and you have to extend it when it reaches a certain size, and the editor doesn't have code completion, and actually there's no version control. So I really was very much on the verge of immediately quitting again. Fortunately for me, the world has changed a lot in the Business Central environment, and it's a lot closer to what I personally like and what I was used to before joining the NAV world. So that went well for me, but I can relate to the idea of trying to get out of the NAV world and failing at that.
That was exactly my reason as well, but that's 19 or 18 years ago. So.
That's funny. So for someone coming in new now, they would have a better impression perhaps than you had when you started?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Does that get into a lot of what we wanted to talk about today in terms of some of the latest development best practices and latest tools and methods? Is it because of those that it's really improved?
I would say so. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't want to speak too badly about the old days because I know there was also a lot of advantages of being in that world and a lot of people who are very successful in doing business there and also customers running very successfully on that and kind of an environment. So I don't want to speak too badly about it. It's just that from the background that I'm coming from, and I would also say from the background that most of young people that are coming in directly from university or whatever the background might be, they feel a lot more familiar with where we are now. And I think it's also very clear that we have a lot of advantages now using Visual Studio Code as an editor, which has become kind of an industry standard now. Using Git as version control, if you want to basically moving to file-based development, that is also something that a lot of people are familiar with and has a lot of advantages. The idea of developing extensions only has a lot of advantages. So yeah, I think really it's a lot of change that has happened over the last couple of years for developers and also for, let's say, operations people in the sense of people operating the environments, because the structure there has changed as well. But it also opened up a lot of opportunities like real CI/CD, like real version control and that kind of thing. I completely understand that it has made things more complicated for people who were very familiar on C side and were very happy with doing their business there. So it might have been a step back from that perspective. But I think overall, from the total professionalism, from the chances to do really good quality control, and from the adaptability for newcomers, it really has vastly improved, in my opinion.
Waldo, I remember you writing some blog posts probably 2 years ago, maybe more at this point, where you tried to explain your perspective on some of these things that Tobias just said in terms of who should be changing their methods and is it necessary for everybody to completely shift to extensions? And this was some time ago. Does that sound familiar? And has that perspective changed at all?
It has not changed, actually. And I do think that I know what you're talking about. I have been quite, let's say, I call it passionate about the fact to not, or to try to at least, and quote unquote, follow the rules and make the best decisions as at all possible. Like, in my opinion, there should not be a shortcut. I think you're referring to the blog post where I was like talking about hybrid solutions and maybe code customized base app and these kind of things, which I was very passionately against. I don't think it's a shortcut to go through like anything hybrid or anything code customized base app. For me, that's like a very big detour. And that's
sort of like wasted effort.
Maybe not directly wasted effort, because there probably are good reasons to go hybrid and to go code customized base app. But on the other side, I think a little bit more effort to avoid this kind of implementations is also a good thing to think about, if you know what I mean. Because yeah, I totally agree with what Tobias was mentioning. Like it is much better now where we are heading, like the extensions and anything development related. Now we have the tools that we want, let's say. But that's good for anything or anyone that is familiar with those tools and those things. And I do understand, like for people like me and a lot of other dinosaurs that have been in Seaside for a long time, that's a big change. And I see a lot of people referring to Seaside as it being simplicity, and that was the great strength. And what I keep telling those people is like, maybe we shouldn't look at it as a strength, but more as a poison, right? We have been kind of like poisoned a lot with these kind of, let's say, bad practices. That's how I try to look at it. And I try to look at now the new tooling as being like finally a mature environment that we can embrace.
From my perspective as a non-developer, I've sensed that at some point, I forget exactly how long ago now, but I started to hear from you, probably from other experts in the Nav and Business Central space in the development area, especially about some of the things that we've already mentioned, CI/CD, the debate or the discussion over when to adopt extensions, containerization, and Docker. These all sort of appeared to me very quickly, and I saw people talking about them at conferences, and I saw blog posts about them, and even Microsoft's sort of senior technical teams were talking about them all of a sudden, it seemed like to me. And since then, I know there's this sort of, there's challenges for some people and maybe some debate, but it seems like a very clear path forward, and that there's not really any question from my perspective of what direction things are moving. Is it a matter that some people resist the changes, or is it more of just the challenge of it? Can you characterize that at all? Tobias, do you want to start?
I think it's very important in that area to think about who needs to understand and who needs to adopt what. I'm almost as passionate as Waldo is about hybrid, about the fact that who needs to understand CI/CD, who needs to understand Docker, who needs to understand that kind of thing. Because at least in my opinion, for a developer, it certainly is important to understand VS Code. It's very important to understand version control. But then that's basically it. I think that either you should have someone in your company, someone in your team who specializes on CI/CD, who specializes on containerization, if you want to go down that route, and who needs to understand how that works and makes it available for everyone else. We as Cosmo decided to have a central team that provides kind of a service for all the developers, for all the consultants in the company, to take away that complexity. So they definitely need to jump on board the VS Code and AL and extension development train, but they basically shouldn't worry about what a pipeline is or what a container is. It should just work for them. And yeah, we are offering that as a service externally, but basically I think if you're not willing to spend that money on that one, then you should still spend the time or spend a person that is understanding how that works. So not every developer needs to understand, but instead they just have an environment that they can use. Because I think it's very clear that this is the path forward. As you said, senior people in presentations were suddenly talking about Docker, where probably without wanting to say anything bad about them, but probably they didn't know what it at all was like half a year before that. And I think it very clearly shows how the importance has gone up, and a lot of things are built on top of those base tools and on top of that base technology. So I think there's no way around adopting that sooner or later. But as Waldo was talking about simplicity, I think it's the same here. The only question is, can you have the same kind of simplicity still? Can you do it on your own? Do you want to ask someone else to do it? Or does every developer, every consultant have to deal with that kind of complexity? Because actually it might be possible to have the same simplicity, maybe not on the exact same level, but something that's very close to what you had before with Seaside, where you basically only do your development, you do the compilation, you hit it on a couple of buttons, and then it still works again, and it gets deployed to the environment where you want it to, and that kind of thing. It's just a different setup that needs to happen. It's not coming out of the box as it was before from Microsoft, but you can get to the same level again and basically have a similar level of simplicity with the new tooling as well.
Okay. And that sounds like a pretty good message for people to understand. Is that what you've been telling to perhaps non-developers to get them to understand why Docker matters, what the real responsibilities are for doing CI/CD, and what different people's skills need to be? When I hear it as a non-developer, and I think you explained this, who really needs to know what? Who needs to really invest in which knowledge and maybe which systems to start buying or paying for on a monthly basis as a service?
Yeah, just to add maybe 2 more sentences on that. I completely agree. I think it's important that people understand the basics. Like as a BC developer, you need to understand the basics of how a SQL server works. But at the same time, you don't need to be able to create your own indexes directly in SQL. That's just something that the tooling takes care of for you. So it's important to understand how it works. And that's why I think it's also important for developers to understand what a pipeline is, what CI/CD is, how versioning works, how the deployment works from a perspective of understanding the mechanism, but it's not necessary that they're able to do it by themselves and instead just have the benefits, but also the skill is somewhere else, either in the company or outside of the company, so you can just use it. And as a developer, you only need to understand it, but not fiddle with it, fix problems or something like that.
Waldo, did you want to add something?
Well, maybe a little bit of a different perspective. The ecosystem has changed a lot, right? The business that we were doing in the Seaside world, and now that we have AppSource and SaaS and all those kind of things, just makes that we need to react fast. And I totally agree with what Tobias is saying. Obviously, if you demand of your developers or technical people that they all have the same skill set, starting from infrastructure, being Docker and all those kind of things, being DevOps, pipelines, to development-wise and being able to, let's say, post a sales invoice, well, then you're asking a little bit too much, I guess. We need to be able to react really fast because of the fact of the continuous upgrades, because of the fact that we have still have multiple versions, all these kind of things. And yeah, it's just all those tools that we have now make it possible to react fast, but they need to be implemented decently. And that is kind of like where you need the experts to implement them decently.
One of the things that I think of is James Crowder wrote another Microsoft MVP, and he wrote recently about that his long-term view is that for almost any Microsoft partner, as you scale up your Business Central customer base, they all have their own extensions. They all have ISV solutions that are packaged, I guess, as extensions in most cases. As that number of customers grows and the number of extensions per tenant extensions grow, as these updates come out every 6 months or even more, the need for this services engineering expertise centrally in each partner is going to be more and more critical. Is that the same issue?
Yeah, exactly. Just imagine you have a product. Back in the day, the owner of the product decided what the new version was and what version to support. That's not the case anymore, right? Now the product is on AppSource and Microsoft basically upgrades every month, and you need to make sure that the product still works on the next version. This is typically something that you need to take into account. And not just with the product, also with any kind of customization, you need to make sure that it will work against next version. And you need to make sure that everything that you do will be able to be upgraded. And that just means that you need to organize yourselves within your company to make that happen, to make that possible.
And it probably also means that you definitely can't do it manually anymore. I mean, that also is something that you need to understand. The minor releases are out every month. The major releases are out every 6 months. Even if you're staying on-prem and you have any interest in staying up to date, basically now have an 18-month window until you need to make the next upgrade. And there are probably implementation projects that are longer than 18 months. So you might have to do the first migration before going live. So I would say that the overall effort actually hasn't gone up because you only need to support one version for your product if you're fully SaaS, or at least you need to have lesser versions that you need to support because the support lifecycle is slower or is shorter. But at the same time, because it's happening so often, there's no way you can do it manually in the old days, you maybe did a release every half a year and then you were really quick, or maybe once a year. So you could put people into a room for 3 weeks, let them test, and then you were fine. But that's just no longer possible. You need to be quicker than that, and you need to automate things because otherwise you would be wasting so much time, and it just plainly would be extremely annoying for people to test the same thing over and over again every month. So you need to automate the tests and you need to automate the builds and make sure that everything works and you understand when you run into a problem. So you need to fix anything, or when everything is all right and you can just go on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little more about some of the work that you've both done specifically on this, because within your own organizations, you've both developed things and have put a lot of thought into what's really needed here. Waldo, from your side, you have ALOps. Can you tell us a little more about that and maybe how that came to be?
Well, it came to be a little bit from the community, basically, because we had a big project. That's all I would start. This is now like 4 years ago. And it was still where extensions was very much in beta, but it was going to be a multi-year project. So yeah, let's do extensions. That's kind of like the approach that we did. So we were a little bit thrown into having or needing DevOps solution that manages multiple developers and continuous integration and continuous deployment all over the place. And we built the scripts and all that to make that possible. And a year after that, I went to Directions US, I think it was. I did a session on that tool, like this is how we manage and this is how a future in development for extensions could look like. At that time, it was still a future. And where I got a lot of questions like, can we please have this? Or can you please sell that? Because this would also save our internal methodology as well. So, and that's how basically we turned this into a product. And the product is actually a set of building blocks that is available within DevOps as an extension that people can use to build their own pipelines. We basically take away the complexity to talk with Business Central, to compile, to run tests, to deploy, and all these kind of things. There's no PowerShell at all going on. It's basically just configuration within DevOps. Building blocks to facilitate all the different scenarios that partners can come up with. And from years of working with partners now that implement DevOps, I can tell you that there are a lot of scenarios that partners come up with for managing their product. That is actually what ALOps does. I hope that's kind of that's a little bit clear.
And it's now a product that's over 2 years in production, right? You've had it out there, and I've seen
a little bit more than a year. I think it's released. We have been in like a beta kind of phase for quite some time with beta testers and with early adopters. And only when we really satisfied everyone, we basically released the product.
Okay. Any interesting feedback you've had so far? I've seen nice reviews on the Visual Studio Marketplace, I think, or any other findings or interesting observations?
Well, maybe you should ask Tobias.
Oh, okay. Are you also a customer, Tobias?
Absolutely, yeah.
He was one of the early adopters, actually.
Tobias, yeah. If you could tell us more, because I know you and Cosmo also have developed services offerings to help sort of meet some of these needs too. I know you've presented on containers and some integration work that you've done. Can you tell us a little more about that?
Actually, the history of the idea came with me from the previous company where I set up something similar. It was at a time where creating Docker containers and working on that kind of thing was, more or less, let's say, unsupported. So you really had to have deep knowledge on Docker, deep knowledge on that area. And I said, okay, let's create something that helps people to have the benefits without having to have the knowledge. And we started on a lot lower level, created something that had a front end in Business Central and a back end, a couple of servers. And then I happened to change company and I brought the idea to Cosmo, convinced a couple of people that this is a good idea. And then we created something on a whole different level, from a user-friendliness perspective. It's really on a different professionality level and scalability level now. But the base idea really is the thing that I talked about before. The knowledge is still very specific. There are great things like the BC container helper that Freddie Christensen from Microsoft has created. But at the same time, I still believe that this is knowledge that not everyone needs to have. And then there are great tools like ALOps, and we are very happy users of ALOps because we decided that Waldo and team are doing an amazing job there, and we don't want to spend the time on that one. We can spend our time on other topics. So we decided to use it and are, as I said, very happy users of it. But still, at the same time, you need to create the pipelines around it. You need to understand how it works and how you want to adopt it to your products. And again, we decided this is something that not everyone needs to understand inside of Cosmo, because we are working both as an ISV with our product development teams and as a VAR with our different companies, different regional entities that we have around the globe, basically. And we decided, okay, let's put something together that everyone in Cosmo can use to create their projects, to create their pipelines as easy as possible. No technical knowledge basically is needed. It should all come out of the box in the same way. That helps with stability. It helps with saving time. And on a side effect, it also helps if different people from different regions are working together, because it's always structured in the same way. So we know how this works. And that basically gave us the idea. So we created it internally. And then at some point, my boss said, okay, this is something that we in Cosmo can use, that everyone in Cosmo can use. Shouldn't we be able to sell this outside of Cosmo as well? So we opened it up basically, I think around the early this year or late last year. I can't remember exactly when we had the first trial where people outside of Cosmo could give it a try, and we had positive feedback there as well. Then we still had some work to do to decouple it from our own infrastructure, decouple it from a couple of specifics that only we have in Cosmo and aren't relevant for others. And a couple of months ago, we onboarded the first 3 customers, and the 4th one has also joined. So we're in discussions with additional customers and partners. So we're trying to scale that service up. But The base idea really is take away the complexity, make it as easy as possible to use Docker, to use ALOps or the whole CI/CD pipeline stuff, make it possible to be used by a developer directly in Visual Studio Code, and make it possible to be used by non-technical consultants as well by offering a Power App that they can use to spin up environments, to create test environments, demo environments, whatever they need. Basically, it's all the same backend, 2 different front ends, and everyone should be able to benefit from the new stuff from the professional development and CI/CD environments by using our tools.
That's really interesting. And it's fascinating to hear how it's sort of grown in how much it covers and how comprehensive it can become and how much potential it has. It makes me wonder what Microsoft thinks of all of this, because obviously this starts with their products and it uses so much of what they do. Well, what kind of feedback have you heard from people at Microsoft? And also, what are either of you asking from them to help make these things better?
I think I'll let Waldo go first on that one.
I'm actually not asking too much of them, except from stability, right? I don't know why you asked the question, but it just raises one memory that I had a discussion a few months back from the latest release and the release before that, where Microsoft basically finds it okay to break testability, but not to break the product, while, in my opinion, testability is still part of the product. And this is just an example where obviously anyone who runs a pipeline against next version is suffering from. When you break testability, your pipeline will simply not work. So that's, I think, the only discussion I had related to anything pipeline related or ALOps related from Microsoft. Like, let's apply the same rules to testability than what you do to the base app. That's kind of like it, I guess.
Well, maybe I can add a bit to that. I completely agree with what Waldo said. The only thing that I'm sometimes wondering, and that hurts the perception of our product, but also I think hurts the people who are working on those topics, it's that sometimes it's presented a bit oversimplified. Again, there are great tools and demos out there who are doing an amazing job of helping people to get started, but sometimes it's a bit underrepresented how much effort it is to keep things up and running, to adapt to changes, to make sure that still everything works. And I'm not talking about the extensions or the AL code itself, but the infrastructure around it. A new Windows server comes out. Business Central decides to update the .NET framework or something like that. It really happens behind the scenes, but has an effect on all the things that you're doing in your containers, in your pipelines, and so on. So this is something that, basically, you have people who haven't jumped into that world, and then they take a look at some of the things that Microsoft is showing and presenting and say, okay, that seems easy. Let's just try it ourselves. And then I come around and show them what our service does. And I guess that it's kind of similar for what the ALOps people are interested in ALOps are saying that, oh, wow, this seems very expensive. Can't we do that by ourselves? And then we have the people who've tried it and have gone down that route and understand how much effort it is and how much of a pain it can be. And then they say, okay, it's a very reasonable pricing because it can save me so much time. And that maybe would be the one thing that I think would be fair to let people know how complicated and how much of an effort the maintenance can be, because it would probably change the perception of the topic and also make it fairer for people who are working on this inside of the typical partner who gets started and then suddenly it becomes time consuming and it becomes a complex topic. And probably they are also getting some feedback like, why isn't this quicker? It seems so easy. And I think that's not fair as an overall perception of the topic.
Oh, I can totally relate to that. And maybe a very good example in what myself, a great example in what Tobias is talking about, because basically the tool that Tobias created, we are not using that within Effecto. And there's only one reason, because we have been investing within trying to simplify kind of the Docker experience within the company. We have invested that. And I can tell you, we have invested too much in that. But obviously now it does work. But if I would have the choice now, today, and that product from Cosmo, I should not make any kind of doubt for that. I should not doubt any. We have invested far too much in that. And about the work in the background. Well, that's basically the same, I guess, for whatever we do, anything pipeline related. Any version, any kind of, as Tobias said, .NET framework update or test run or whatever, we try to fix behind the scenes as fast as possible, only when we notice it, obviously, because it's not like it's documented anywhere, just to keep things running, right? And if you just multiply that with anyone who would also manage that for themselves, it's a little bit like that many people probably is fixing the same things. Anyway, I just want to confirm what Tobias said.
Okay. And when you talk about new organizations beginning this journey or learning about what's required, can you characterize what types of organizations those are? I'm thinking perhaps companies that have been focused more on older nav, or perhaps it's companies that are just making the decision to sort of join the Business Central channel for the first time. Is that the types of profiles, or is it something else?
I mean, for our tooling, I would say that's certainly an interesting area or it's an interesting type of company, because they probably don't have anything already set up. So it might be an easy win for them to say, okay, I need to understand how VS Code works, how the new development language works, how extension development works. So I'm already putting a burden on my developers and I already have a learning curve. So why not just let the rest be taken care of by someone else and we'll pay for it? And maybe in 2 years we'll do it by our own, or maybe we don't, but at least we don't have to do it now and we can focus on the core of our business, which is developing business code to make our customers happy, either in products or in projects. So I think that's very interesting. And at the same time, I'm also seeing companies, as Waldo described, who've been trying to do the same thing and have either failed, to be completely honest, or they have succeeded but understood that it's just too much effort that they're willing to spend, either because it's just literally too much money and our service is cheaper if you calculate all the time. Or we sometimes also see companies where the technical guru, the one or two persons who are really good at that kind of thing, decides to leave the company for whatever reason. And now they really struggle to find someone else to fill in those shoes. And they're deciding now is the point to outsource that kind of problem to someone else who has a team that is taking care of that. So that would be, in my opinion, the two typical scenarios. Either you don't have it and you need to get it and don't want to invest by yourself, or you have invested but are either not happy with the result or not happy with the kind of time and money you have to spend on it.
And absolutely the same can be said about ours.
Maybe just to clarify, I'm not sure if we mentioned that or we clarified that enough. Our solution is really based on ALOps. I can't quantify the percentage, but some part of our solution is completely dependent on ALOps. It's just that we're putting additional things on top that ALOps can't do. But at the same time, our offering wouldn't work without ALOps. So it's kind of a superset of what ALOps is doing, but ALOps is a very crucial part of it.
And the customer base, is it primarily other Microsoft partners, or do customer development teams also use this?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have 3 customers right now that are partners. We have one customer that is just a customer, not or a company, not a Microsoft partner, with their own development team. Basically, as soon as you have more than 1 or 2 developers, I think our offering should be interesting. But talking about the companies that are in discussion about coming on board our offering, I would say it's like 2 out of 3 are partners and 1 out of 3 are actual customers.
Basically, anyone development, right? Anyone who develops, and even not even a team. I mean, if you need to develop, you need tooling, you need a methodology, and that's where the tool comes in. Both tools come in.
Should the broader customer base care about these topics? Should they be hearing this and reaching any kind of conclusion or learning any lessons about what this all means if they're not developers?
I mean, I would say if they're not developers, then they probably don't care that much, because the whole offering is really centered around development. There are also some use cases for our tooling where you can easily get a demo environment for a new version to try something else, or set up something where you can try a new configuration or something like that. But that probably is either if you're in SaaS, then that's just a new sandbox that you can use. Or if you're on-prem, then you probably also have some way to set up a new test environment. So that's an interesting part that helps a lot. but I would say it's not enough to make sure that the investment that you put in is enough for that. So I think you need to have some kind of a development investment or development effort going on to make it worth your while.
The one thing I thought of was just, to me, it seems like a strength for a partner organization to be able to say that you have these strong practices in place, because it seems like there's a real possibility for a partner serving a customer without some of these practices in place, that they could create real chaos over time. If things break, if Microsoft releases an update and it's not, there's no pipeline to catch any issues automatically, that customers could over long-term face some real costs as a result of poor practices.
In my opinion, that's a real danger. And that's something that I see, unfortunately, in my own company, not related with DevOps, but where we actually do some VAR and ISV stuff, that when we come across certain customers and when I see how other partners, also from those customers, are doing their job, that can conflict with what we are doing with that customer. So if you know what I mean. So implementing good practices, what I, for instance, see a few times already, which boggles my mind, is that some partners totally do not implement any kind of trace of DevOps, not a trace of CI, not a trace of CD, basically just building on their laptop and uploading an app manually to the client. And that happens quite often. Then look in how we should all work together, because in the cloud, we're all one big family of happy global admins or delegated admins. Well, that doesn't really work at that point. And we really need to combine as much as at all possible, pipeline wise. So yeah, nothing more to add, I guess.
I think what you asked, Jason, it was is it kind of an insurance when lightning strikes, so to speak? So when a disaster happens? And I think, yes, absolutely, it helps with that. But at the same time, it also helps a lot during your regular day. So it's basically, if you're in the boat that Waldo just described, where you're just building things manually, deploying manually, then you're not in such a great position. It's to keep with the weather analogy, it's it's always raining. You can make do, you can keep your umbrella and you're more or less fine. But if you have a real good structure in place using ILOps, using something like our service, then it's the chances are the day will be sunny because you're in a good place. You have everything under control. You know what you're doing. You get very early warning signs when something is about to happen and you can react on that. It's very stable. It's not relying on the individual talent of people, which can be fine, but also is prone to fail at some point of time because humans are just making mistakes. That's just a fact. So yeah, I really think it helps when disaster strikes, but it also puts you in a better place each and every day.
All right, excellent. I wanted to maybe just end by getting a little bit of your perspective, each of you, on what you're looking forward to next. Thanks again for being here as well. This has been really, really fun. But when you sort of look forward and what to expect either from Microsoft or perhaps what you're watching for in the channel, do you have any either predictions or just things that you're on alert for? Waldo, does anything come to mind?
Not exactly. No.
Okay. You're taking things as they come, as they say, as the saying goes.
Let's take that as no comment.
Exactly.
Everything can just stay the way it is. It will be.
Maybe I can add two things that I personally am looking forward to. One is on the, let's say, more or less technical side, which is monetization, where Microsoft is talking now for a long time about making monetization possible for partners. So you can have an easy way to do monetization, and not each and every partner needs to implement their own solution, or a couple are sharing solutions, but still it's at least in my opinion, that's not a good story, to put it politely, for the whole app source story that each and everyone is having to implement their own monetization solution. So I would very much look forward to get something from Microsoft. And there has been signs of progress, not a ton, or at least not that I know about, but it seems like we're finally making some progress, or Microsoft is making some progress, and we as partners can hope to get a solution on that. And that would be on the more or less technical side. And then from the implementation application side, I'm really not a functional person. But what I really like is the new onboarding framework. And I'm very much looking forward to what they're building on top of that one, things that they're using it, because really the whole story of people being able to self-implement, to have a good onboarding experience without a lot of help by humans anymore. That is just such a huge opportunity to scale and to help people with onboarding, to help partners to get rid of the repetitive stuff that not a lot of people like to do anyways. So I really think that's a great direction, and I hope that there will be a lot on that end as well.
So maybe I have one more to add to that, since we are at it. Well, on the technical side then, what I have been personally looking forward to, and I was very happy that it was on the roadmap for the next version, is the performance profiler.
Oh yeah.
That's something that I miss dearly, and finally we will have something on that perspective. So, and I just know that it will help us a lot.
That's a great one as well, yeah.
All right, excellent. Just briefly, I would add, the one thing I'm really interested in is to hear the next time Microsoft brags about increases in the customer base. I've had a couple of people ask me if they thought the last numbers that were shared were accurate or not, and I don't really have a way of knowing that with certainty, but I keep hearing from partners, I guess I should say North American partners who have said this, but that they're having a lot of success right now with adding brand new Business Central customers as opposed to upgrading Nav customers. And I'm just interested when that will result in Microsoft sort of announcing new numbers of increases in the customer base for Business Central. And I think that ties back into some of these challenges with scaling as more customers, more ISV solutions get added, more customizations on a per customer basis, and how well developers keep up at the same time with some of these practices that you've told us about today. So that's that's the thing I'm interested to watch for.
A very, very good one as well. I completely agree. As Cosmo, we're doing a huge campaign and trying to bring in people to the new world. We're seeing some early success, and it really is an interesting story where it can be a struggle to convince customers that this is the right way forward to see the benefits. But as soon as they are in the new world and they get their first major upgrade, and of course it needs to work. If there is a problem, then of course they won't be happy. But as soon as you have the first major release that gets updated and the customer basically just notices, oh, there's a new feature. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to pay anything for it. It just appears and everything still works. Then that is, compared to the old migration projects that were really hurtful for a lot of customers, then it becomes a great story. So yeah, 100% agreed. Can't wait for more to get onto that ship and be able to have the benefits of being on a SaaS infrastructure.
Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you both. Tobias, I think you're the first dual MVP that I've talked to before. I didn't realize that before. I'm guessing we'll see more of that to some degree. I think it'll still be rare, but yeah, congratulations on that. I didn't realize before we talked that was your situation. So maybe we'll have to catch up on Azure next time, other Azure topics.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And regional director.
I have to be honest, I've never known exactly what to do with the regional director title, but I know it's rare. It's more rare than MVP, right?
Yeah. It's like, I think 200 or something like that across the world. So yeah, it's less. It's also very terribly named because people immediately think I'm working for Microsoft, and I'm absolutely not. So yeah.
I actually thought that. I was like, what is he doing?
Yeah. I think that's everybody's reaction the first time they learn about it. Waldo, Tobias, thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been another episode of the MSDW podcast. My thanks once again to Tobias and Waldo for joining me today. For more information on Tobias and Waldo and all their work, please check out the links in the podcast description. If you want to get in touch with me, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and on LinkedIn. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.